Hey, it's our Paralyzed Math Industry, and we are going to take a look at global trade. So, there are two countries that want to figure out what they specialize in. But after they figure out what they specialize in, they're going to make a trade. But how can we understand and make sure that the trade is fair? How can we do that? Well, what we have to do is find which country will specialize in what job. So let's introduce the countries. So the first country is going to be the United States of America. And the resources that are listed here is lumber and fish. So they're saying in 1 week they can make 10 lumber or they could make 4 fish. So basically, what that is saying is if they did all their time on lumber, they would make 10. Or all their time on fish, they would make 4. So this one, the USA, this is their production possibility volunteer. Okay, but what country are we comparing and trading it to? Well, this national anthem is going to help you understand what we're comparing to. And the reason why we chose this one is yes, the Soviet Union, aka the USSR. The reason why we chose this nation is because the USSR and the USA were two global superpowers. So they were really big and they were really good at economics and trading. However, this got into a conflict between capitalism and communism because they wanted to figure out which one was better economically. They didn't want a hot war. They didn't want an actual war. So they wanted to start a war with economics. So in this case scenario, the USSR can make a whopping 20 lumber and 16 fish if they did in 1 week all lumber 20, or if they spent all their time on fish, it would be 16. So it looks like here that the Soviet Union has an absolute advantage because they can make more in both products. However, we have to understand how they're going to trade fairly. So what we have to do is find the comparative advantage. So to understand the comparative advantage, we have to do an equation. We're going to do, if we say the USA is going to do 10 lumber or 4 fish, or the letter F. Then we're going to write that on the bottom, 10 lumber again, or 4 fish. On the other side, for the Soviet Union, what we're going to say is 20 lumber or 16 fish. And we write that again as 20 lumber or 16 fish. And we have to understand how can we compare each of the products by if we find if one product equal this, then how many products would equal the same thing. For example, for the USA, we're going to divide and calculate something. So what we're going to do is divide this by 10, divide this by 10, divide this by 4 and divide this by 4. This will help us because we're trying to find what L is on the top. And also, we're going to try and find what F is on the bottom. So for L, we're going to say that one piece of lumber is going to be equivalent to the price of 2/5 fish. Who knows? Maybe this lumber might be very, very tiny. Who knows? So if we do that for the second one fish is going to be equal to about 5/2 lumber. So maybe the lumber is a bit bigger, maybe it's smaller. We're not really depending it on size, but we're trying to see how many lumber is equal to a fish, or how many fish are equal to a piece of lumber. Now, let's try and look at the Soviet Union's equations. So instead, we're going to have to divide this side by 20, divide this by 20, divide this by 16, and divide that by 16. On the top, we're trying to get lumber alone, and on the bottom, we're trying to get fish alone. So, for every lumber is equal, we are going to get 4/5 fish. So, in this case scenario, for the Soviet Union's opportunity cost, one piece of lumber is going to equal 4/5 or 4/5 of a fish. Now let's look at fish. One fish is equal to about 5/4 lumber. So that is going to be the equations for the Soviet Union. Now we gotta compare and find who has the comparative advantage. Even though it looks like the Soviet Union has an advantage of making both the fish and the lumber faster than the USA still has a chance because we still have to find a comparative advantage and see who will specialize in something. Then we are allowed to trade. So to understand how we can find who makes the product cheaper at a lower cost, so to understand who specializes in something, we gotta find out who makes each product at a cheap price, or who makes it more efficiently. For example, if we talk about the fish, one fish equals 5/2 lumber for the USA. But for the Soviet Union, one fish is equal to 5/4 lumber. So we gotta find the smaller fraction of the smaller number so we can find out who makes it cheaper and who makes it more efficient. Well, 5/4 is smaller than 5/2, so we're gonna say the Soviet Union is going to make fish and specialize in it. So we're gonna say the Soviet Union is gonna specialize in fish. Now, for the USA, one piece of lumber is equal to 2/5 fish. For the Soviet Union, one piece of lumber is equal to 4/3 fish. So the smaller one is going to be this equation right there. So the USA is going to specialize in lumber. So now, if we take a look at the equations, then take a look back at the graph, then we are going to say if they want to specialize and only produce the item and resource that they specialize in, then we are going to say that the USA will make 10 lumber once a week, while the USSR is going to make 16 fish once a week. So now we understand who is doing who and who is doing what. Now we can actually start trading. We are allowed to go into this empty box, whatever this is called, and we also get to break the rules because now we are allowed to trade. What we just did is find out the absolute advantage and the comparative advantage without trading. So now let's see what happens. So now the two global powers want to actually trade with each other so they can have a fair share when it comes to doing so. So the Americans have 10 lumber and the Soviets have 16 fish. What they could do is kind of split the things up. So they both have lumber and fish at the same time. the USA is going to give the Soviet Union half of their lumber. So we're going to say 5L. And we're also going to say the Soviets are going to give us half of their fish. So we're going to say 8 fish. As a result, now the USA is going to have 5 lumber left, but now have 8 fish. The USSR, or aka the Soviet Union, is going to have 8 fish and also have 5 lumber. So the Americans are willing to sell lumber because even though they know they can make it in their country, they are trying to sell it for another good, fish. With the Soviets, they're trying to sell fish to buy lumber from the USA. So this is a fair trade. When we have the transaction between the two global powers or superpowers, right here, matched here and here, it means that there is a fair trade. But sometimes we can't be so fair when we have the different equations. When we have these equations, if the USA focuses on lumber and tries to use this equation as how much fish they get, and the Soviet Union will want to use this one and how much lumber they will get, it's more competitive because now it's not 100% fair. You'll have to use decimals and go between some kind of point so the Soviets and the Americans can agree with each other. So that explains global trade and how this can be fair and how it can't. But it also tells you some history about the two global superpowers. I hope this video has helped you. Thank you for watching Tao Ping Your Life's Math Industry. Like and subscribe.